Hi everyone, welcome back to my channel. My name is Shia, and it's that time of the month again where we go over the books I read, but this time for January. And this month I read 6 books. I didn't get higher than average because January is my birthday month, so I didn't get a chance to really read anything. And I hate to say it, but the first 2 weeks of the year I was kind of going through a book slump. Nonetheless, let's get started with my stats. As I said, I read 6 books in January, and this month I read 2,523 pages. I read 3 fantasy romances, 1 literary fiction, and 2 young adult books. And my average rating was a 4.04 stars. I didn't really have any bad books this month, but I didn't really have any standouts either. And all the books I read this month were all physical. I didn't read anything on my Kindle because I'm going through the point where I don't really want to pick up books on my Kindle right now, which is really bad because there is a lot of books on Kindle Unlimited I would like to pick up, especially books that have been buzzed about, but hopefully in February I would want to pick up more. And if you saw my previous video, I did start doing a TBR jar, but for February, and I didn't really want to do one for January because like I said again, it's my birthday month, so I didn't really want to pressure myself to read books that were on a TBR list. And also I wanted to give myself a fresh start starting in February instead of January because I was going through the book slump. So let's get started and go over the books I read in January. So the first book I read in January was the first book of the Mortal Instrument series by Cassandra Clare, and it's called City of Bones. This follows a character named Clary who goes to a sort of teenage club in New York with one of her good friends and witnesses a demon attack with shadow hunters who are torturing this creature. She ends up finding out secrets about her family and their close ties with the shadow hunters universe. This book was first published in 2007. I first read this when it first came out and I did like my time with it. This was like my first introduction into the shadow hunters universe. I don't know if you've seen my other previous videos where I talked about the Shadowhunter universe, but when I came back to reading, I did read the Infernal Devices series, and I moved on to the sort of sequel to the Infernal Devices, which is the Last Hour series, and I found out there was a full-on reading order for the Shadowhunters universe that I never knew existed because I first read this book in 2010s. I read the first 2 of the Mortal Instrument series, and then there's the big sort of plot twist or plot device used at the end of the first book, and I wanted to see if it would get resolved. And once it wasn't resolved in the second book, that's when I dropped it and I stopped reading the Shadowhunters universe because I just didn't like that particular plot device. And I think most people know it by now, but I don't want to spoil it for anybody just in case that you don't know. It took me forever to finally pick up the Shadowhunters universe again and started falling in love with it again from reading the Infernal Devices, and then I found out that there's a full-on reading order. I wanted to go over this reading order in order to prepare myself for the Wicked Powers coming out in late 2026. The first book is supposed to come out, and I think this is going to be the last trilogy that Cassandra Clare is ever going to write in this Shadowhunter universe, which is crazy because I've known this universe for over 10 years. It brought on the nostalgic vibes of when I first read it because this is very early 2010s. It's joking about early 2010 humor, and it's very cheesy that way. Every character in here is so young. Clary ends up interacting more with different characters from the Shadowhunter world, and then we meet characters like Jace, Isabel, and also Alec, who are sort of adopted siblings. And so she starts interacting with them more, and then she opens up her eyes to the full-on Shadowhunters universe where there's different creatures like fairies and vampires, and we also interact with this warlock too named Magnus Bane. I forgot how much I love this series because of the fact that it's early 2010 humor. It just brought on the nostalgic vibe, but I already know this is probably not going to be my favorite series of the Shadowhunters universe. Infernal Devices is my favorite series, and so I ended up giving this book a 4 stars because I loved how fun it was and how bingeable it is. And it reminded me about how much I love this series and where I first started with this. And so I am going to be slowly making my way through the Shadowhunters universe. And then the next book I picked up was Dance of Lies by Brittany Arena. This is a typical fantasy romance. It follows a character named Vasily, and she has been imprisoned for 2 years. And she used to be the king's favorite dancer, and so she was called the Jewel. She had a very close relationship with the king, not really romantic, but she did start falling for him while she was getting to know him. And so she got falsely imprisoned by a crime that she didn't commit. And so she was stuck in this jail for 2 years. She started losing strength in her body. And so one day after 2 years, the king comes to proposition her, telling her that if she becomes his spy, she has to travel over to his brother's kingdom in order to find out his secrets and report it back to the king. And once she's done with this mission, then she could go on and do whatever she wants with her life, and she would be free from imprisonment. demons. So of course she wants to get her life back. But in order to do this, she has to join sort of like a dance entertainment company, and she hasn't been dancing for 2 years. She's lost all her abilities basically to dance, the strength in her legs. It basically mirrors what the author's actual disabilities are. The author has POTS, Ehlers-Danlos syndrome, and also MECFS, chronic fatigue syndrome. And so she has to deal with this and find a new way to basically dance because she doesn't have the same strength that she had in her body because she gets tired really easily. She doesn't have the strength where she can do complex dance moves like she used to. And so while she's over at the King's brother's kingdom, she ends up making friends and finds out that there's like more to this whole entire story. He is more nefarious on his plans than he is telling her, obviously because he doesn't want to reveal all his plans to her because he doesn't fully trust her. And so dance is really strong in this book, so it's very descriptive, and there's like a story that's being told in this like dance that she does where she performs for the kings and also the court, and she ends up interacting and like sort of flirting with a couple of these characters that we meet along the way. And so we don't really know who the true love interest is until maybe towards the end. I had a good time with this. I know that like the rating on this on Goodreads is actually pretty low, but I had a good time. I love the whole entire aspect of like the dance being a big part of the story, and I liked how that was portrayed in here, and also I love the disability rep in this too. She does have to deal a lot with like losing her talent and having to gain her own strength because of like losing it when she's in this jail. But I felt like some parts were dragging a little bit, so I did only give this a 4 stars, but I had a good time with it, and I can't wait for the second book to come out. I believe this is going to be a duology only, and I think the next book is coming out in August. So I feel like this is a good summer book because the setting of where the kingdom is, the way to describe it, it's sort of like Greece, the way it comes to mind. And it sounds like such a great summery place to be. Do highly recommend it. Like, is it the most unique? I don't think so, but I love like the aspect, like I said again, about the dance, and also the fact that there's like a disability rep in here. And I do really like the mailman characters because I do like how they see past what they see from Vasily. It's just really cute. I love how she interacted with one mailman character over the other because I already knew from the moment we met this mailman character who the love interest was. I did get tripped up a little bit between the two because it was going back and forth a little bit, but I do highly recommend this. And then if you just want a good fantasy romance, it's just a fun good time that you don't take too, you know, seriously. Like, there is sort of a high stakes part at the end where everything starts coming together and like starts rushing together too. By the way it turned at the end of the book, I can't wait to see what happens next. And then because I wanted to stick with fantasy romance, I picked up The Wind Weaver by Julie Johnson. This follows a character named Rhea Fleetwood. Rhea Fleetwood is a halfling, half fae, half human. And in this world, halflings are sort of shunned in their society and like looked down upon and like burned out of their villages. And we find her about to get executed because she was found to be stealing. She is rescued by a commander and basically is told that she is the last known wind weaver in this world. And so she is one of 4 like tetrad where they're supposed to be fated to save the world, to bring the balance back to the world because there's been like so much chaos and like injustices happening in the world. The land is basically dying and they need to come together to save this world. And so she travels along with him and travels to the kingdom where she is ultimately trained. And then we also meet another mailman character here too, who is another elemental. And so it's sort of like a love triangle, but in this book we only see one side of the love triangle over the other one. And so she has like this good found family in here. I do really like how it's like elemental in this book. I love that she's a wind weaver, and she, of course, like a typical fantasy romance, has to find out how to hone in her power after believing after years and years where she was like a lowly creature who was just trying to run to live. But when we get to the actual kingdom where she trains and everything is where all the action actually really starts. I absolutely love the elements of this. I do love the mailman characters. I do find the chemistry is better with one mailman character over the other. I like the fact that there's so many different like elementals at play. There's fire, there's water, there's obviously wind because she's the wind weaver, and she like has to build up her confidence in order to be able to be a part of this tetrad. It was like more of a journeying book than anything. And like I said, these fantasy romances are just not as unique anymore. And yes, it's not as unique as I want it to be, but I did really have a good time still. And I'm hoping the second book will be the one that will make me obsessed with this because I do really like the world. I do love how beautiful the world is described and the different kingdoms that we have. And it's like a big world where there's like sort of a big war that's brewing because there's of course groups that don't like the halflings, and then there's another group who wishes they have like the halflings powers and the Fae's powers, and it's just like one big world. And I'm just like looking for classic romanticies at this point, and yeah, I'm not taking this stuff too seriously, and so I gave this a 4 stars as well. And the second book is supposed to come out in April. I think that one is called The Sea Spinner, and I'm really excited to see where that is turning out to be because I like how the direction is going. And also I feel like this reminds me a little bit of the ending of the first ACOTAR book, and where like it doesn't feel like a huge cliffhanger happens. It feels like one problem is kind of like solved a little bit at the end, but you can sense that there's like a bigger problem brewing at the end. So I can't wait to continue on. And because I reached my fill at fantasy romances at that point, I need to pick up something else and decided to pick up a literary fiction. And I picked up Broken Country by Claire Leslie Hall. This book is set in the English countryside, and we follow a character named Beth who's lived in this English countryside town and small town her whole entire life. She is married to a farmer named Frank, and unfortunately they lost their son a few years back due to an accident. During present time 1968, a dog comes and sort of attacks one of their sheep. Her husband ends up shooting this dog, and so she finds out that this dog is owned by none other than her former love, Gabriel Wolfe. And Gabriel and her had sort of like a whirlwind romance when they were teenagers, and so it jumps back between 3 different timelines. One in the past when she and Gabriel first met, and then the present timeline where it's 1968, and the future because there's a trial going on. We find out that a murder mystery happened. We don't know who was involved, we don't know who the murderer was, we don't know who the victim was. And so it goes back and forth between these like different timelines, and Gabriel has a son that reminds Beth of her little boy. It's just crazy how everything comes about. I actually really did enjoy my time with this. It's very dramatic, and it kind of gets really toxic because of the choices that Beth makes overall. I kind of like end up not liking her towards the end because I feel like she makes choices that affect everyone else but doesn't really have big consequences on her. It kind of stems from the grief that she has from losing her son, and of course she is grieving and she is hurt, she is dealing with the grief, but yet I don't think that should be the excuse of the actions that she's like done. I did end up giving this a 4.25 stars because I couldn't put it down. The first 100 pages though, it did take me a while to get into the book because it was a little bit boring, and so it was just going back and forth between the different timelines, trying to establish a story for us, trying to establish her relationship between Frank, and also establish the way she and Gabriel met and how they basically tore apart. Like I said again, I love the story overall and how the mystery came about, but I just didn't like the female main character. She just didn't have any redeeming qualities to me, and I just felt so bad for all the characters who were around her. I just thought that everyone deserved better from her, and yet she didn't really get the consequences that she sort of deserved. At the same time, I do feel bad that she lost her son. Obviously, losing a child is really hard, and so I did enjoy my time with this. I would hesitate recommending this, especially if you're not really liking toxic characters, because I feel like Beth is one of those toxic characters that really didn't have any redeeming qualities at the end. But I would suggest picking it up just for the murder mystery vibes, and also if you're really into literary fiction, I would recommend this as well. The second to last book I read in January was The City of Ashes by Cassandra Clare, the second book in the Mortal Instruments series. I forgot how easy these books were to read, so of course I'm flying through them because I'm already maybe a quarter of the way through the third book already. I'm having an absolute blast with this. We continue on from what happened in the first book. The plot twist is still not resolved in this book, and so we're going through with continuing on with the big storyline that's happening in this book, basically trying to find out more of like Clary's past and the different connections that she has with all these different people that she didn't even know existed. And so we find some more of her lineage and everything, and then we find out the big baddie's plans in this book. I don't know if I mentioned I don't think so, but in the big villain that's happening is like basically an old Shadowhunter who used to be part of the Shadowhunter Clave organization. The Clave is sort of like their government. They're governing people who are the ones who establish the rules and then make sure that everyone's aligned and everything. And I guess he's the one who doesn't want to follow the rules of the Clave and has his own ideas of how Shadowhunters should run their whole entire organization. So of course he's like the big baddie. He's trying to collect like items in order to enact his plans, and that's like continuing on with the second book. And we also have little relationship quips here and there between characters, and so we are still continuing with that plot twist. If you know, you know. And this one I also gave a 4 stars to. I love that it's like set in New York because we get to see little parts of New York. I highly recommend like going into this if you don't want to go jump straight into the Shadowhunters universe, especially like Infernal Devices, I feel is a lot more less friendly with its world building, especially if you're a beginner. This one's is a lot friendlier world building. It's a fun, good time, and I'm really liking my time with it. So like I said, I'm in the 3rd book right now. I will most likely finish it in February, so it'll be next in my wrap up. And then the last book I picked up in January was In the Veins of Drowning by Callie Cassidy. This is sort of like a dark fantasy romance. It follows a character who is a siren, and she's caught in this kingdom where basically they execute sirens, and she's trying to hide the fact that she's a siren, and she's under the thumb of this king who sort of like rescued her as a kid. And because of this cruel king, she is betrothed to this commander who is basically the main killer of sirens, and she has a friend who is also a siren, and she was basically her governess growing up, and she basically chastises her for, you know, marrying the commander, but she doesn't have any ties with her people. Like, she doesn't really want to discover that part of herself because she is hiding it, obviously, because she's in a kingdom where they kill her. But because of an unforeseen like circumstance that ends up happening within like the first few chapters, she ends up trying to seek help from somebody who is a visiting king from another kingdom, and because of like her dire circumstance, she ends up forming a blood bond with this foreign king. And the MMC, his name is Theodore. He reminds me so much of Anthony Bridgerton, obviously from Bridgerton. The way he yearns, I love how he yearns for her, and the relationship they have, it's very reminiscent of Anthony and Kate, how they're like bickering with each other and how they're sniping at each other, but you could feel the tension radiating off of them. So it's not necessarily like they don't have feelings for each other. You feel it from the get-go how they are attracted to each other, and I think that's one of the main reasons why I think he decides to help her too. I love like the dark grittiness of the story. It deals with like how sirens are from like the ocean. It's like dark, dreary place. It seems cloudy and everything, and she has never really ventured outside of the kingdom because the king never let her. And so she ends up going on this adventure where she finds out more of her siren lineage. This book is a duology. I love the interactions she had with the male main character. I thought they were great, and I love the tension between them and the attraction that they had. And also the sirens are portrayed differently in this world because they have wings. And so she discovers more of her power and discovers more of like the abilities that she has, and she tries to hone it. But I did end up giving this book a 3.75, and I rounded it up to 4 stars on Goodreads. The main reason why is because I felt like the plot was jumping around a lot. There was like so many new things that like would be brought up that I just wanted a deeper depth to, and it wasn't really fleshing out the connection. It was just a lot of like little different plot points that tried to connect to each other that just seemed really chaotic. And also the biggest problem I also had was with the female main character. I just thought that she didn't think through a lot of her choices, and a lot of the stuff that she found out were like plot twists were very obvious to me. And I didn't like at the end where she had to do a certain decision in order to continue on with like fighting like the big villain, and the stuff that she did was like so obvious to me. Like it's clearly it was being spelled out to us as the reader, but yet she would be explaining it and narrating it in her head, and I would assume that she would connect it, but she didn't. And when those certain consequences would come, it was so predictable. So that's the reason why I couldn't give it higher than the 4 stars. I did enjoy my time with this. I think the biggest like saving grace for it was the male main character Theodore. I loved how he was. We didn't have any depth to her. She was just going along with her circumstances rather than fighting against it, and I'm interested to see how it's going to be continued because I hope we see more character growth in her in the next book. So if you are a big fan of Rachel Gillick's writing, I think you would absolutely love the way this book is written. The detriment was just like some of the plot points that I didn't like, and also the female main character was like kind of annoying to me a little bit. And I've mentioned multiple times before in my other videos that characters have the ability to make or break a story for me, and yeah, that's the reason why I give it a 3.75. I wanted to give it higher than the 3 stars because again, I did like my time with this and I did love the writing. I just wish like a lot of the plot was fleshed out more, but I'm hoping we get it more fleshed out in the second book, and the second book will come out in July. I really did like my time with this, and I would highly recommend, especially if you're looking for another dark gothic read. So that is it for my January wrap up. It is a quicker one than I'm pretty used to because like I said again, I was going through a slump the first 2 weeks in January. I get sort of like seasonal depression around this time because I don't like it when it gets dark really easily. I love the winter time, don't get me wrong. I am a winter fall girly. I just don't like how the sun sets so early. I wish we had like more daylight, and I find that my mood and my anxiety and depression is a lot better in the sunlight than it is like being stuck in like darkness, because especially since, you know, the sun sets so early early, it sets at 4, and it feels like when the sun sets that your day just feels done and that you can't really do anything else in your day. At least that's how it works in my head. I'm trying to break out of that mentality, but it's kind of hard to do. So I'm hoping that since like I kind of broke through the slump a little bit, I will continue on more. I have like a lot of books on my TBR that I'm really excited to read. I'm so grateful for all you guys who have been subscribing lately. I have gotten an influx of like new subscribers, so welcome to my channel. Anyways, thank you for your support. Thank you for subscribing, for liking. It really does help my channel a lot. I will see you all next time. Bye.